Hello and welcome to the Azure AD and Azure AD B2C for Developers and Architects course, another installment in the Azure Architecture series. In this course, we will learn how to add robust authentication and authorization capabilities to your application using the best, largest identity management systems in the industry. Now, in order to really understand the added value of Azure AD and Azure AD B2C, we first need to understand the challenge we often face. Almost every system should have authentication and authorization capabilities. It's really rare to find a system that doesn't care who its users are and what they are allowed to do. These capabilities include at least user management, where the system stores and validates the user details, assigns them to roles and groups, and audits their activity, and authentication logic determines the flow the user goes through when authenticating. But here lies the challenge. Such systems often require support for advanced login capabilities such as multi-factor authentication, passwordless, and more. The authentication engine becomes a single point of failures. Every entry to the system goes through it. That means it must be extremely reliable. Often, we need social integration, allowing users to log in using Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and more. The authentication engine is required to comply with modern authorization and authentication standards such as OpenID Connect. Of course, the whole authentication engine must be extremely secure, or else, well, that's the whole point of it anyway. And lastly, while authentication and identity management are extremely important, they are not part of the main business. You, the developer and architect, need to design and develop a system that implements a great business ID, and you don't want to waste your time developing authentication and identity management engines. So, this is a challenge. Authentication is a crucial part of the system, and it has to be robust, flexible, secure, and easy to use on one hand, and on the other hand, we prefer to use existing tool for it. And for that, we have Azure AD and Azure AD B2C. So, what are Azure AD and Azure AD B2C? Well, first, they are cloud-based identity providers and services, and we will discuss the difference between identity provider and identity service later in this course. In addition, they both provide secure, standard-based advanced authentication and authorization. They are robust, scalable, and secure, and extremely flexible. The level of customizations enabled in these engines is really amazing. And perhaps most important, your app doesn't need to be in Azure in order to use Azure AD and Azure AD B2C. As long as it's accessible over the internet, you can use these engines with your app. Now, note, usually, when talking about Active Directory, we discuss about infrastructure and IT operations, such as configuring servers, setting up domain controllers, and more. This is not the case here. There is a lot offered to developers and architects in Azure AD and Azure AD B2C. And this is what we are going to focus on in this course. The goal here is to show you, the developer and the architect, how you can use Azure AD and Azure AD B2C in your application, not how to deploy Active Directory in the organization. For that, there are a lot of other IT-related courses. This course is strictly about developers and architects. So, what are we going to learn in this course? We are going to discuss the basics of the cloud, which is important since Azure AD and Azure AD B2C run in the cloud. Then we will learn about authorization and authentication concepts, which are the cornerstones of the way Azure AD and Azure AD B2C work. We of course are going to focus quite a lot about using Azure AD and Azure AD B2C for adding authentication and authorization to your app, covering all the major capabilities of these engines that will allow you to create robust, flexible, and customized authentication experience. And also, we'll talk about some advanced security concepts that you should be familiar with. Now, this is not an ordinary course. It is very comprehensive. We will start from the very basics and go to the most advanced topics. It is extremely practical. We will actually use Azure AD and B2C on a real app. It's relevant and up-to-date, built on my experience as a software and cloud architect for more than 20 years. By the end of this course, you will know how to integrate Azure AD and Azure AD B2C with your app. You will know how to customize it to your needs. You will know how to implement advanced security controls, and most important, you will become a better software architect and developer. So, who am I? Well, my name is Memi Lavi, a senior software architect and consultant with more than 20 years of experience as an architect. Here is a very partial list of my clients and my diverse technology stack. I'm a certified Azure solution architect and an avid speaker. So, let's go.